My laptop displayed the quarterly revenue charts. As I prepared to address our board of directors, the same numbers I'd been analyzing since 3 that morning. Innovate Tech Solutions had grown from a startup in my garage to a $50 million company, but according to my business partner Marcus Chen, I was just along for the ride. Quarterly revenue is up 37%. I began, clicking to the next slide. The boardroom was packed with investors, advisors, and department heads, all watching the presentation I'd spent weeks preparing. Our AI-driven predictive analytics platform has secured contracts with 12 Fortune 500 companies this quarter alone. Marcus shifted in his seat at the far end of the mahogany table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his MBA from Stanford prominently displayed behind him in a gold frame. He positioned himself as the face of our company from day one, handling client meetings and investor presentations while relegating me to what he called back-end support. The irony wasn't lost on me. Back-end support. As if developing the revolutionary algorithms that powered our entire platform was some kind of clerical work. The predictive accuracy has improved to 96.4%. I continued, which represents a significant advancement in the field of machine learning applications for business intelligence. Board member Patricia Williams leaned forward. Julia, these numbers are impressive. Can you walk us through the technical improvements you've implemented? Before I could respond, Marcus cleared his throat loudly. Actually, Patricia, I think we should focus on the business metrics rather than getting bogged down in technical details. Not everyone here has a computer science background. I paused mid-click, my finger hovering over the laptop trackpad. This was typical Marcus. Any time the conversation turned to the actual technology that made our company valuable, he redirected to sales figures and market positioning, areas where he could shine while keeping me firmly in shadows. I think the board would benefit from understanding the technical foundation, I said calmly, especially since our upcoming product launch relies heavily on the new algorithms I've developed. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished hardwood floor. The sound cut through the room like a warning shot. Let's be honest here, Julia. You're just the silent money in this partnership. Leave the real decisions to people who understand technology and business strategy. The room fell silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, could see the uncomfortable glances exchanged between board members. Investment advisor Robert Chen shifted his papers nervously. CFO Patricia Williams stared at her hands. Marcus continued, his voice gaining confidence as he warmed to his theme. Julia's a wonderful person, don't get me wrong. Her initial investment got us started, and we're grateful for that. But running a technology company requires experience, leadership, market understanding. Things that can't be learned from textbooks. My initial investment. As if the $200,000 I'd put in from my previous startup sale was all I'd contributed. As if the countless 18-hour days I'd spent coding, debugging, and perfecting our algorithms were somehow irrelevant. Marcus, I said quietly, perhaps you'd like to explain to the board how our predictive analytics actually work. Since you understand technology so well. His face flushed slightly. That's not necessary. What matters is results, not technical minutiae. I nodded slowly, reaching for my briefcase. The leather was worn from years of carrying it to client meetings, investor presentations, and late-night coding sessions. Marcus had always dismissed it as outdated, preferring his sleek aluminum attaché case that matched his MacBook Pro. You're absolutely right, I said, clicking the briefcase latches open. Results are what matter. I pulled out a thick manila folder, the kind that lawyers use for important documents. The papers inside were yellowed with age, some of them dating back 6 years to when I first started developing the core algorithms that would eventually become Innovate Tech Solutions. Before we discussed results, I said, placing the folder on the conference table, I think the board should understand who actually owns the intellectual property that generates those impressive revenue numbers Marcus mentioned. Marcus's confident expression flickered. Julia, what are you doing? I opened the folder carefully, revealing the top document. United States Patent and Trademark Office. It read in official government typography. Patent number 10,847,392. Inventor, Julia Martinez. Filed, March 15, 2018. This is the original patent for our predictive analytics engine, I explained to the suddenly attentive board. Filed 18 months before Marcus and I officially became business partners. Patricia Williams reached for the document, her eyes scanning the technical specifications and legal language. Julia, this is the core technology that powers your entire platform. That's correct. I pulled out the next document. Patent 10,923,847. The machine learning optimization algorithms, also filed solely under my name. Marcus had gone very still. The color was draining from his face as board members passed the patents around the table, reading my name as the sole inventor on every single document. And here, I continued, producing a third patent is the natural language processing component that allows our system to analyze unstructured data. Filed 14 months before Marcus joined the company. The boardroom was silent except for the rustling of papers as investors and advisors examined the patents. Robert Chen looked up from his copy, his expression grave. Marcus, were you aware that Julia holds sole ownership of these patents? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. His usual smooth confidence had evaporated. We're partners. I assumed. You assumed what? I asked quietly. That because I let you handle sales presentations and investor meetings, you somehow own the technology that makes those meetings possible? I pulled out a laptop from my briefcase. Not the sleek MacBook everyone expected, but a battered ThinkPad covered in coding stickers. The same machine I'd used to write the first lines of code that would eventually become our AI platform. Would you like me to show the board the original source code? I asked, opening the laptop. It's all time-stamped. Every algorithm, every optimization, every breakthrough that Marcus claims to understand so well. The screen displayed a directory full of files, each one dated and documented. Years of work, thousands of hours of development, all bearing my digital signature. Board member David Kim leaned forward. Julia, if you own all the core patents, what exactly is Marcus's role in the company? I looked at Marcus, who was staring at the table like it might offer him escape. That's an excellent question, David. Marcus, would you like to explain to the board what you've contributed beyond sales presentations and taking credit for my work? This is ridiculous, Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. I've built relationships with clients. I've secured funding. I've managed the business side while Julia focused on coding. Interesting, I said, pulling out another document. Because according to our client contracts, they're specifically licensing my patented technology. The relationships you've built are entirely dependent on intellectual property that belongs to me. Patricia Williams was studying the patents intently. Julia, these are remarkably sophisticated. The technical depth here suggests years of specialized development. 12 years, actually, I replied. I started working on predictive analytics during my PhD program at MIT. The core algorithms in these patents represent the culmination of over a decade of research and development. Marcus suddenly stood up. This is clearly some kind of setup. Julia's trying to undermine our partnership because... Because what? I interrupted. Because I'm tired of being called just the silent money at board meetings. Because I'm sick of watching you take credit for work you couldn't begin to understand. I clicked to a new screen on my laptop, displaying lines of complex code. Marcus, since you understand technology so well, perhaps you could explain to the board what this function does. Marcus stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The code was dense, mathematical, the kind of algorithmic thinking that required years of training to comprehend. That's not. It's the core prediction engine, I said calmly. The algorithm that processes millions of data points and generates the insights our clients pay $50,000 per month to access. I wrote every line of this code. I optimized every function. I debugged every error. David Kim was taking notes now. Julia, what percentage of the company's core technology did you develop personally? I pulled up a technical documentation file. 97%. Marcus's contributions are limited to user interface suggestions and marketing copy. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus slumped back into his chair, his earlier bravado completely deflated. There's something else the board should know, I continued, opening a new folder. 3 months ago, Tech Global Corporation approached us about acquiring our technology. Marcus negotiated a preliminary offer of $100 million. Several board members straightened up. $100 million was more than double our current valuation. However, I continued, since I own all the core patents, any acquisition would require my explicit consent. Marcus forgot to mention that during his negotiations, Robert Chin's eyes widened. Marcus, is this true? You negotiated a deal without securing the intellectual property rights? Marcus's face had gone completely white. I thought. You thought you could sell technology you don't own, I finished. Just like you thought you could take credit for innovations you didn't create. I pulled out my phone and opened the email app. In fact, I received this message from Tech Global's CEO this morning. I read aloud. Ms. Martinez, after reviewing the patent filings you forwarded, we're prepared to discuss a direct acquisition of your intellectual property. Given your sole ownership of the core technology, we see no need to involve other parties in these negotiations. The board members exchanged glances. The implications were clear. Tech Global was offering to buy me out directly, cutting Marcus and potentially the entire company out of the deal. Julia, Patricia Williams said carefully, what are your intentions regarding this acquisition offer? I closed my laptop and gathered the patents back into their folder. That depends on this board. Are you interested in continuing to work with someone who truly understands the technology? Or would you prefer to stick with a partner who dismisses the inventor as just the silent money? Marcus finally found his voice. Julia, you can't do this. We built this company together. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Together? Marcus, I built the technology that powers every product we sell. I developed the algorithms that generate every dollar of revenue. I created the intellectual property that makes this company valuable. What exactly did we build together? The business relationships are based entirely on my technology, I interrupted. Our clients don't care about your MBA or your sales presentations. They care about predictive analytics that actually work. And those analytics exist because I spent 12 years developing the mathematical models that make them possible. I stood up, closing my briefcase with a decisive snap. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for next week. We'll be voting on a new corporate structure that accurately reflects intellectual property ownership and technical contributions. Board member David Kin raised his hand. Julia, before you go, could you clarify something? If you own all the core patents, what prevents you from simply licensing the technology to a different company? Marcus's eyes went wide with panic. He clearly hadn't considered this possibility. Nothing, I said simply. The patents are in my name. I could license them exclusively to Tech Global tomorrow and leave Marcus with a company that has no technology to sell. You wouldn't, Marcus whispered. I looked at him directly for the first time since placing the patents on the table. 2 hours ago, I wouldn't have considered it. But then someone who's never written a line of code told me I should leave technology decisions to people who understand technology. The irony was perfect. Marcus had spent 3 years positioning himself as the technical visionary while dismissing me as a passive investor. Now the board was learning that he understood about as much about our technology as a random person on the street. The emergency meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday, I announced. I'll be presenting a comprehensive review of intellectual property ownership, technical contributions, and future development roadmap. Anyone who's interested in understanding what actually makes this company valuable is welcome to attend. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? The next time you want to explain technology to someone, you might want to start by learning what an algorithm actually does. The door closed behind me with a soft click, leaving Marcus to face a room full of investors who now understood that their golden boy knew absolutely nothing about the technology that made their investment valuable. As I walked through the hallway toward my office, I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Tech Global's acquisition team. They were eager to discuss terms for a direct purchase of my patents. The preliminary numbers they'd mentioned were staggering, enough to make the $100 million Marcus had negotiated look like pocket change. But selling wasn't necessarily my goal. I'd spent 12 years developing this technology, and I wasn't ready to hand it over to a corporation that might not appreciate its full potential. What I wanted was recognition, respect, and most importantly, control over the work that had consumed more than a decade of my life. My office was exactly as I'd left it that morning. 2 whiteboards covered in mathematical equations, 3 monitors displaying real-time system performance data, and shelves lined with technical manuals and research papers. This was where the real work happened. This was where innovations were born. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The same battered ThinkPad that had witnessed every breakthrough, every late-night debugging session, every moment of inspiration that led to our current success. Marcus had always encouraged me to upgrade to something more professional-looking, but I preferred tools that prioritized function over form. My email inbox was full of messages. 3 from reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the board meeting drama. 5 from potential investors interested in discussing partnerships. And 1 from my patent attorney confirming that all my intellectual property filings were secure and up to date. The last message was from Dr. Elizabeth Chen, my former PhD advisor at MIT. She'd been following Innovate Tech's progress and wanted to congratulate me on the recent innovations in predictive analytics. Her message included a link to a research paper that mentioned my work as a breakthrough in applied machine learning. I smiled reading her words. Dr. Chen understood the technical complexity of what I'd accomplished. She appreciated the mathematical elegance of algorithms that could process millions of variables and generate accurate predictions about complex business scenarios. She recognized the years of work that went into developing technology that Marcus dismissed as technical minutiae. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Patricia Williams stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Julia, do you have a few minutes? I think we need to talk." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Patricia had been one of our earliest board members, invested not just financially but emotionally in the company's success. She'd also been one of the few people who consistently asked about the technical side of our products. "That was quite a revelation in there," she said, settling into the chair. "I have to admit, I never realized the extent of your technical contributions." "Most people don't," I replied. "Marcus has been very effective at positioning himself as the technology expert while keeping me in the background." Patricia was quiet for a moment, studying the equations on my whiteboards. "Julia, can I ask you something directly? Are you planning to leave the company?" It was a fair question. After 3 years of watching Marcus take credit for my work, the temptation to walk away was strong. Tech Global's offer would set me up financially for life, and I could start fresh with a new company where my contributions would be properly recognized from the beginning. "I haven't decided," I said honestly. "It depends on whether this board is willing to acknowledge reality, or if they prefer to continue living in Marcus's fantasy, where he's the technical genius." "The patents are pretty conclusive evidence," Patricia said, "but I'm concerned about the company's future. If you and Marcus can't work together—" "Patricia, let me be clear about something. I've never had a problem working with Marcus. The problem is Marcus's inability to work with me as an equal partner rather than a silent investor who should stay in her lane." I pulled up a document on my computer. "For 3 years, I've been trying to implement advanced features that would keep us ahead of competitors. Marcus has blocked every proposal, claiming they're too complicated for our target market." The document showed a detailed technical roadmap for features that would revolutionize predictive analytics, real-time learning algorithms, adaptive neural networks, quantum computing integration, innovations that could establish InnovateTech as the undisputed leader in artificial intelligence applications. "These features would triple our market value," I explained. "But Marcus refuses to support development because he doesn't understand the technology well enough to sell it to clients." Patricia studied the roadmap carefully. "This is incredibly sophisticated. How long would implementation take?" "With proper resources, 18 months for the full suite. But I'd need complete technical authority. No more having my recommendations overruled by someone who thinks machine learning is too complicated for business applications." "What would you need from the board?" I'd been thinking about this question for months. Recognition as Chief Technology Officer with final authority over all technical decisions. A development budget appropriate for the innovations we're planning. And Marcus either accepts a reduced role focused purely on sales, or he can find another company to misrepresent his expertise to. Patricia nodded slowly. "Those seem like reasonable requests, given what we learned today." After she left, I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing patent filings and technical documentation. Every algorithm, every innovation, every breakthrough that made InnovateTech valuable could be traced back to my work. Marcus had contributed sales presentations and marketing materials, but the core technology that generated our revenue existed entirely because of my expertise. The next morning brought a steady stream of board members to my office. David Kim wanted to understand the technical roadmap. Robert Chen asked detailed questions about patent protection and intellectual property licensing. Even some of our major investors scheduled calls to discuss the company's future direction. Everyone, it seemed, was suddenly very interested in understanding the technology they'd been investing in for 3 years. Marcus was notably absent from these conversations. According to his assistant, he'd called in sick and wouldn't be in the office for the rest of the week, probably strategizing with lawyers about how to minimize the damage from his public humiliation. On Thursday, I received a formal letter from Marcus's attorney. It claimed that the patents should be considered joint intellectual property since they were developed while we were business partners. The legal argument was weak. The timestamps clearly showed that most of the technology predated our partnership. But it confirmed that Marcus was planning to fight rather than accept reality. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney with a note. Please prepare a comprehensive response documenting the timeline of intellectual property development. Include all relevant email records, code repositories, and technical documentation that establish sole ownership. By Friday, the emergency board meeting had been rescheduled for the following Monday. Marcus's legal maneuvering had convinced the board that they needed to thoroughly review all intellectual property claims before making any decisions about company leadership. That was fine with me. The more closely they examined the evidence, the clearer it would become that Marcus's contributions were purely superficial, while mine formed the foundation of everything valuable about Innovatech. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched my mood as I prepared for what would likely be a contentious board meeting. I'd spent the weekend compiling a comprehensive presentation that documented every aspect of my technical contributions, from the original research papers that inspired our algorithms to the most recent innovations that kept us ahead of competitors. The boardroom was packed when I arrived. All 7 board members, both company attorneys, Marcus looking uncomfortable in an expensive suit, and a technical consultant the board had hired to evaluate our intellectual property claims. Before we begin, announced Board Chairman David Kim, I want to establish that today's meeting is focused purely on factual review of technical contributions and intellectual property ownership. We're not here to assign blame or make emotional arguments. Marcus shifted in his seat. He'd clearly been hoping for a forum where he could charm the board with his sales skills rather than defend his technical claims with evidence. Julia, would you please present your documentation? I opened my laptop and began the presentation I had spent years preparing in my head, even if I'd only put it together over the weekend. The evidence was overwhelming. Patent after patent, all filed under my name. Thousands of lines of original code, all documented with my digital signatures. Research papers and technical publications, all citing my innovations as breakthrough developments in machine learning. The technical consultant took extensive notes, occasionally asking for clarification about specific algorithms or development timelines. His questions demonstrated a deep understanding of computer science that made Marcus visibly uncomfortable. Ms. Martinez, the consultant said during a break, the sophistication of this work is remarkable. The mathematical complexity alone would require years of specialized training. How long did you spend developing these algorithms? The foundation was laid during my doctoral research, I replied, but the commercial applications took approximately 8 years of full-time development. Marcus couldn't stay silent any longer. This is all very impressive, but it ignores the business development that made commercialization possible. Technology without market strategy is worthless. The consultant looked at Marcus with interest. Mr. Chen, could you describe your specific contributions to the technical development process? Marcus stammered through a response about user interface design and client feedback integration. Valuable contributions, certainly, but hardly the kind of foundational work that justified his claims to technical leadership. And the core algorithms? The consultant pressed. What role did you play in their development? Marcus's face flushed. I provided strategic guidance about commercial applications. Strategic guidance, the consultant repeated. Could you explain the mathematical basis for any of the predictive models? Silence. Marcus stared at the table, finally confronted with the undeniable reality that he understood virtually nothing about the technology that made our company valuable. The board voted unanimously to restructure the company with me as Chief Technology Officer and sole owner of all intellectual property licensing rights. Marcus would retain a position as Vice President of Sales, but with no authority over technical decisions or product development. As board members filed out of the conference room, Marcus approached me with an expression I'd never seen before. Humility. Julia, I owe you an apology. I got caught up in the success and forgot who made it possible. I looked at him for a long moment. Marcus, I don't need an apology. I need a partner who respects expertise and recognizes contributions. If you can do that, we can build something amazing together. If not, Tech Global is still interested in acquiring my patents. He nodded slowly. I understand. It won't happen again. 6 months later, Innovatech released the advanced features I'd been developing for years. The market response was overwhelming. Our client base tripled, our revenue increased by 400%, and 3 major tech publications featured our innovations as breakthrough developments in artificial intelligence. Marcus, to his credit, focused on what he did best: building client relationships and presenting our technology in terms that business leaders could understand. He never again questioned my technical decisions or suggested that I should leave technology to the experts. And when reporters asked about the company's remarkable growth, Marcus always made sure to credit the brilliant innovations of our Chief Technology Officer. Finally, the right person was getting credit for the right work. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's simply forcing them to acknowledge the truth they've been trying to hide. In a world where technical expertise often gets overshadowed by smooth sales presentations, there's something deeply satisfying about proving that innovation, not manipulation, creates lasting value. The patents remain in my name. The technology continues to evolve under my direction, and Marcus has learned that understanding technology means more than being able to pronounce artificial intelligence in client meetings. It turns out that when you actually know what you're talking about, you don't need to silence other people to prove your expertise. You just need to let your work speak for itself.